I'm Melanie Zanona in Washington, and this is CNN.
Members of the Trump family and Republicans are rallying behind former President Donald Trump tonight. Don Jr. raging, saying, quote, the Democrats have succeeded in their years-long attempt to turn America into a third world shithole. His words, not mine. Meanwhile, Ivanka Trump posting an image of herself as a small girl with the caption, I love you, Dad. Republican allies reacting with fury.
This was certainly a hoax, a sham. This was devastating for the average American.
This is the most outrageous travesty I've ever seen. And the problem here is Democrats have crossed this line.
I've never heard constituents so frustrated and so angry at what they've seen.
They're so afraid of Donald Trump that they're willing to ruin our election system.
My reaction, like that of many Americans, is one of fury, outrage, contempt.
Joining me now, Republican Congressman from Florida and Trump ally and person who may be on a short list for the VP, Byron Donalds. Congressman, thank you for joining me this evening. History has been made today, and many have had a visceral reaction one way or the other. What is your reaction tonight? Do you respect what the jurors have had to say in their verdict?
No, I don't. And I think it's part the jury's fault, but it's really at the fault of Judge Merchan. His jury instructions were ridiculous by many legal scholars who examined what he gave the jury, and they never saw anything like this. You have a situation where the actual federal crime about the election was never really identified anywhere through the trial, except at closing arguments by the prosecution. After the defense had finished their closing arguments, the judge repeatedly interrupted the defense when they were trying to bring information to the jury's understanding. You didn't allow an FEC lawyer, one of the top people in the country with knowledge of how the Federal Election Commission actually works and looks at cases like this. They were not allowed to testify in open court in front of the jury. So, no, I think a lot of people are looking at this case and they see it for what it is. It is a sham. This was a railroad persecution of Donald Trump simply because Alvin Bragg and a lot of radical Democrats in our country wanted to get Donald Trump. They don't view this as justice, and neither do I.
Well, Congressman, a couple points. You mentioned the jury instructions. A lot of it was boilerplate that has been used before, and the parties did have a chance to come together and decide what they would be. But I certainly hear the criticism that many had concerned about what was that underlying theory, that so-called predicate crime that would go from the misdemeanor to the felony. But it is allowed to be able to have the jury decide those on different fronts. But I want to focus on, in particular, the aspect of... I'll let you finish in a second, but I want to finish my point first, sir. I want to focus in particular on the point about who it is was bringing this case, and that's Alvin Bragg. I've heard a number of your colleagues talk about this being the weaponization of the government, and because Donald Trump is the political opponent of Biden. But Alvin Bragg is a state-level prosecutor. He is not under the purview of the Department of Justice. Why do you assign that fault to him?
Well, two things. Let's go back. First of all, the judge did tell the jury that they can decide amongst multiple different federal crimes to adjudicate guilt on this misdemeanor that they elevated to a felony in state court. So if you're going to do that, first of all, you have to bring expert testimony from somebody with federal background on those charges. They did not allow that to be brought forward. Now, specific to Alvin Bragg, the issue here is that he ran on the entire position of getting Donald Trump. That was one of the core pillars of his campaign to become the district attorney in Manhattan. And so now you have somebody who basically said, I'm going to go get somebody, regardless of what the charges might be, regardless of what you might think a potential crime might be. His entire campaign was focused on getting Donald Trump. That's why he's coming under scrutiny, because this is political, not actually about following the law. And I go back to not identifying a crime. The FEC looked at this. They said there's nothing to see here. They are the arbiters of what is a campaign finance violation. So for Alvin Bragg to go out there now and say, well, this is interfering with the 2016 election, he's a state level prosecutor. It's not even his jurisdiction. How can he make that claim when the FEC said there is nothing to see here and the U.S. Attorney's Office said there's nothing to see here?
Clearly, this will be an issue on appeal, as is the different theories that the jury was able to look at. The judge did hear the concerns from the defense counsel about allowing the jury to have that very notion, and he did offer to have the campaign expert actually testify, but you're right, it would not have been a substantive testimony. I wonder what the appellate court will ultimately see. But I have concerns, Congressman, more broadly about our system, not just of justice, but in terms of our democracy. When there is this perception or there is a narrative to suggest that our legal system or our courts or a jury trial is somehow so rigged and unfair, people ultimately lose faith in the entire system. And I've sat through enough trials and heard enough verdicts as our nation to know that you can't pick and choose whether the system is fair based on the particular outcome of somebody you're aligned with. Do you have concerns that by talking about this through the lens you are, that you are undermining people's confidence overall in our system?
No, I don't. I don't have those concerns at all. I think that's been undermined by Alvin Bragg, by Judge Merchan, who frankly has been very clear about his support for Joe Biden. He should have recused himself based upon that. If he was concerned about our institutions, he was not. Now I'm looking at this through the lens of an American citizen and a member of Congress who's taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. I've watched the Biden administration spy on the American people and suppress their First Amendment rights. I've watched the Biden administration ignore Supreme Court ruling when it comes to student loan bailouts, which is unconstitutional, a violation of separation of powers. I've watched the Biden administration ignore people's personal health and make them take vaccines against their own will because they wanted to eradicate COVID-19.
Congressman, I do hear you, but I want to focus on the trial. I don't think we should over-talk each other. I want you to, Congressman, I'd like you to speak, and I really did invite you to give you the opportunity to do so, and I will honor that. But I do want to focus on this particular aspect of today's historic announcement because it is part and parcel to what you have been expressing, and that is the justice system specifically. What my question really is do you have concerns that by suggesting that the actual trial was rigged or that it was that the jurors themselves did not reach the right outcome, that people will doubt the ability for our system to be thought of as just? I mean, and I'll just to be frank here, in the past you have spoken out about various verdicts. One in particular involved Derek Chauvin, a very high-profile trial, and I want to just read for you what you said at the time. Regardless of the result, you said, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process. At this dangerously divided moment in our history, all leaders, regardless of party, must not pour fuel on the fire with more toxic partners. This is Governor Hogan. Hold on. I'm sorry. This is Governor Hogan. I want to read yours. Excuse me, and I apologize for that, Congressman. What you had to say in a statement was this, and my apologies. One's fate is to be determined by an impartial judicial system that is ultimately in the hands of a jury of your peer. We saw that today and every day. Americans should celebrate the fact that we live in a nation that awards every person their day in court and the opportunity for justice to prevail under the blindfold of Lady Justice. That was the Derek Chauvin trial verdict statement. What has changed so significantly for you to doubt the system so strongly now?
Wait a minute. Are we really going to compare Derek Chauvin to Donald Trump?
No,
it's
I'm
not even
I'm
the same thing. I don't even know what that statement means. But what I'm saying is that you witnessed a railroading prosecution in New York. Couple that with the fact that you have two men running for president. One had classified documents in his house when he was a vice president and when he was a United States senator. The Department of Justice has come out and said that we're not going to prosecute because we frankly think he's an elderly gentleman who shouldn't go before prosecution. That's what the Her report says. Conversely, you have Jack Smith seeking those same charges. But you're talking about the justice system, so let's talk about it. You have Jack Smith, who with the same situation, actually not even the same situation, because Donald Trump is a former president allowed to have documents under the Presidential Records Act, and Jack Smith is trying to throw the book at Donald Trump. We've already seen a two-tier system of justice, and now you're watching it unfold with this guilty verdict in New York City. That's why I'm saying you have a lot of people in our country, a lot of them who are not just Republicans, who are looking at this verdict and they are saying this is a sham, this is politicization of the justice system, this is election interference against Donald Trump. And they view it that way because they see whether it's Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, they are treated very, very differently than if it's Donald Trump. You and I both know they never brought a charge like this against anybody else in New York City. They bring it against Donald Trump. Why? Because they simply want to get him. And that is wrong. You can't compare this to Derek Chauvin. I don't even know why we brought up that statement.
Well, I brought up the statement not to compare, and nor did I even intimate that Derek Chauvin and Donald Trump were synonymous. I was pointing out the nature of your statement about a jury of one's peers and having confidence in the justice system. But it is patently false to suggest that no one has ever been prosecuted under existing statutes, like the falsification of business records. That in fact, is not clear. I know we have to go, Congressman, and I hear them talking in my ear, but I can't let you go until I ask you this question, and that is about the politics of this.
I don't even want to talk about it in those veins because this case has been a joke, an absolute sham. The backdrop of this is you have Americans looking at our country and the failure of Joe Biden, who is the master of disaster when it comes to the United States presidency, and they're looking at what's happening in their lives, contrasting that to what the news media wants to focus on, this case in New York, and they're saying to themselves, Joe Biden's been a disaster, and they're going after Donald Trump. This is going to backfire. What's happening now is truly destructive of our institutions and destructive of our democracy, brought to us, frankly, by the Democrat Party, whether that's the state level of New York or the federal level under Joe Biden.
Well, I'll be curious to see if the voters agree with you, but to remind the viewers that we are not aware of the political leanings of the jurors who decided this case. They were 12 of them who were part of the voir dire process. Congressman Byron Donalds, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
There remain a lot of big questions tonight after a historic verdict. Can Trump still run? Is he able to vote? And will he face any prison time? We're going to tackle them one by one next.